Hi guys, it's Molly here, and I'm so sorry for the lack of videos. I have one, I would say, decently good excuse, and that is that I have moved. I have returned to my homeland, to the United States of America, and I am now living in New York City as of a couple of weeks ago. So I've gotten a couple questions on some of my past videos about kind of who I am, where I'm from, what I'm doing. So here's like a super quick Reader's Digest recap of my last 2 crazy years of life. So about 2 years ago, I moved to Helsinki, to Finland for a research grant. Then a year ago, I started a PhD degree program in Malmö in Sweden at a university there. And now I have moved to New York City for a fellowship for 9 months. So I'm continuing, this fellowship will let me do hands-on work that will contribute research to my PhD studies, but I won't be taking any classes or anything like that. So there's been a lot of like twists and turns and changes of locations in that time frame, but that's the basic story. So now on to the topic of this video. Moving back to the USA has given me a surprising amount of reverse culture shock, which I have discovered is a real thing. So here's a few of my observations on that. And by the way, I'm just calling people from the United States American. I know sometimes people get frustrated with that because there's North America and South America, and there's lots of different countries where people are Americans, but I don't know what else to say. United Statesians? I mean, we kind of go by American, so I'm just using American to describe people in the United States. So, there are some things that I have noticed moving back here. And by the way, none of these things are supposed to be critical of one culture or another. It's mostly just observations that I've had, in some ways that I've forgotten about how things are in the United States. So my first observation is just, and also I should mention that within the US there are definitely cultural differences. And I grew up in Maryland in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and now I'm in New York City, and New York City is not a kind of accurate representation of the United States as a whole. It's definitely its own place with its own kind of cultural differences. And I would say in general, the kind of mid-Atlantic to northeast, east coast of the US and the regions around the cities have their own, kind of culture and style than the West or the Midwest or the South. So keep that in mind, but these are some overall things. First of all, I forgot how outgoing and friendly and confident and loud Americans can be. I'm constantly kind of in shock being on the subway and hearing people speaking like so loudly about all like lots of like fairly personal stuff. And it's so funny because this is coming from like Sweden and Finland, where like on the public transportation you're probably not saying anything, and if so it's like very quiet. So that's like one thing about Americans that's a typical stereotype, but it's pretty true. The other thing is that I just forgot how easy it is to get to know people on a very light level here. Like someone who you just see a couple of times in a coffee shop, they really might be someone who, like, even after the first 1 or 2 times, you kind of acknowledge that you see each other. Maybe you say, hi, how are you? Find out a couple things about them, have some light conversation, and then you repeatedly see them, and you have kind of like an acquaintanceship or like a light friendship, and it's actually super nice, especially when you move to a new place, when people are just so willing to kind of talk and chat. It definitely makes you feel like you're integrated a little bit, and like people are just kind of acknowledging you in a way, and that's okay. It's okay to go up and talk to somebody and talk about yourself and what you're doing. But on the other hand, I sometimes have been a little bit taken aback by how what I would say, almost aggressive socially people can be. So, for example, if you're in a public space, sometimes people are really willing to come up and like insistently talk to you, even if you're giving no indication that you are interested or, that you have the energy or are open to meeting someone new or focusing on them, and also talking really about themselves a lot, like right away, up front. And it's just so, it's funny because in Sweden and Finland, I always felt like I was like that. I was always in like kind of nervous and insecure that I was talking too much about myself, that I was being too outgoing, that people would think I was full of myself or a little bit too much or something like that. But here now, I almost feel the other way. I feel like I'm, a little more reserved at first, maybe. And also that I'm a little bit taken aback by how forward other people are. So that's been kind of an interesting experience. And let me just give you kind of a little anecdote for how something like this could happen. Something that I found really entertaining because it was such a easy direct comparison was that I went to a lot of yoga in Finland and in Sweden and in the US. And in Finland and in Sweden in general, when you go into the class, like maybe you're saying hi to a couple of like friends who you have there. Maybe sometimes they're people who you've just seen in the classes multiple times, but usually you don't really say hello to them. Usually, I mean, you're saying friends to people who you're friends with from outside of yoga, and then you see them in the class. But for the most part, you go in, you roll your mat out, and you try not to make eye contact, and you lie there silently, because people are in yoga to relax and to focus. And so you're not, going to disturb their peace. It almost feels like it would be pretty rude, especially to be having a loud conversation in a yoga hall in Sweden or Finland. But I would say that's like fair. That makes sense to me. But the funniest thing was the studio I went to in Sweden, they had this kind of gathering area. And in the gathering area, this was outside the actual yoga halls, there would be like some apples and some walnuts and tea and water, and many people after the end of class would go and sit here on like the comfy cushions and have a cup of tea, and it was really nice. But what was so funny to me, and this is after the class, people are sitting eyes straight ahead, not looking at each other and not talking to each other in silence. Maybe 10 people sitting around together who were just in the class together in silence. And this I found interesting because I was like, I can understand the silence in that class, but now, like, we all were just in the class together. It'd be the easiest thing in the world to kind of smile at each other. Like, you just went through sometimes a pretty intense experience together, and you could talk like, oh, how did you like the class? Have you been here before? How was your day? This kind of stuff, but nothing. In comparison, there was a studio that I really like to go to in Frederick, Maryland, and it's called Soul Yoga. It's amazing. I love it there. But when you go into the class there, and this is not even with people who you necessarily know, as soon as you get into the class, people are smiling at each other from, at their neighbors on the mats next to them. They're striking up conversation, and the whole room is like, brrr, like the teacher literally has to come in and be like, okay, silence now, sit on your mats. And yeah, it's just total small talk with people who you don't even really know. And at the end of the class, also people are talking about how they're training for a marathon, or asking how someone else's kids are doing, or asking what they're up to this weekend, like immediately. And so this was just a funny comparison for how this kind of thing can happen. Now, something else that I have noticed that's a little, I find somewhat upsetting. It's been bothering me. And that is that I forgot how much in the States, because people are willing to be so kind of confident about themselves and so forthcoming with information, how much you kind of have to filter the information you're getting and take things with a grain of salt. And I know that the reason that this happens, that people feel like they kind of have to promote themselves and everything they're doing, is because there's a bit more of a culture here, I would say, and definitely in places like New York City, of people feeling at least like they're being evaluated based on their success in many areas in life, their professional success, their social success, their physical fitness success, all these kinds of things, right? And so because people feel like they're supposed to be good at these things, like they're supposed to, achieve greatness, they feel like in order for you to like them, they have to show you that they've been successful. And sometimes that leads to some exaggeration, I would say, and definitely some self-promotion. And I've honestly forgotten a little bit how to do that. I actually, not totally, I would say, but I just am not as smooth as I used to be. So, like, for example, if I'm just kind of out, like, at a happy hour and just meeting people, I'm not good at succinctly saying what I'm working on or what I'm researching, which is super bad. You should be able to communicate that clearly to someone. But I feel like it makes me almost, I now feel a little bit more actively uncomfortable talking about the stuff that I'm doing. But this is the worst part. The worst part is that I found myself realizing that I need to be kind of trying to call people out on their BS a little bit more actively. Like, not to their faces, but it's just putting a lot more onus on me as the listener or as the receiver of information to filter out what's true and what's not. So if people have said they can do all these things or that they've done all these things, I can't necessarily trust or believe that this is true. And I hate that feeling. I hate feeling like I have to judge people to see if they're like imposters or not, especially because I myself have struggled with a lot of insecurity about feeling like an imposter, about feeling like, oh, can I really say this about myself? Am I actually good at this? Do I actually know how to do this? You know, am I just a big phony? Like, all this stuff, that is the stuff that I have felt, especially as I'm trying to kind of get started in my career and in different fields. So I hate thinking that about other people. It makes me feel awful. And also, it's so much energy. Like, I would rather just believe people what they say. And the reason I partly have to be evaluating is sometimes these are people who I would maybe be working with or maybe start on a project with. So I have to know that what they say they can do is something that they can actually do. And I appreciate and love confidence. I think I really am in favor of people having good self-confidence. And I would consider myself actually a fairly confident person, and I think it's great to feel good about yourself and to celebrate things about yourself that you like and to be able to celebrate your successes. I think that's super important, and I like that people do that. What I don't like is when I feel like some of this information is coming from a place of trying to impress me, if that makes sense. Because I just would rather, like, we all are just who we are, and that's wonderful. Like, people are generally pretty wonderful, and I think we're almost more wonderful when we can be real and also be able to be honest and open with each other about our weaknesses. That's also wonderful, and if we could just feel like we could relax a little bit and just be with each other, that would be, to me, ideal. And being real with each other also includes being real when you're super happy, or when you think you've had a great day, or when you think you really killed it on, something that you did recently. Like, that's cool, and I do want to hear about that, but I don't want to hear just a litany of all the things you know how to do. I don't know. So those are my thoughts, and I've been surprised by how shocked I've been in some circumstances. And I do have to say also, so it's a big deal that I landed in New York City, especially because definitely when I was younger, I did not consider myself to be a big city person. I thought I wanted to move out to the country and la la la. But that's the beautiful thing about self-discovery, is I realized that me being the kind of person I am, where I like to be pretty active and energetic, and like I'm pretty extroverted, so I like being around people a lot, that I like living in cities a lot more than I thought I would. But then I thought maybe I like smaller cities. Like, I like places you can kind of reach to by bicycle within, you can get anywhere you want to go within 15 minutes on a bicycle. That's like perfect. Or a place where, there's lots going on, but you kind of get to know the people in your city. So I was like totally, I came to New York for the specific fellowship, not because I was like, I want to go to New York, baby. Like, that wasn't my thought process. And my first 3 days here, I ended up calling my sister and being like, this was a mistake, I'm moving back to Sweden, because things just felt like a struggle. It felt like a fight. It literally felt like, to get through each day, I was like, like, not literally elbowing people, but figuratively, like, elbowing my way through the city and being like, just getting from one place to another, and like figuring out the subways and the cars being so crowded, and cars didn't always come on time, and and you're just a total newbie and don't know where you're doing or where you're going or what you're doing. So I was just feeling exhausted, and like things were kind of like messy and dirty, and I was like, what is this madness? But I turned a corner, and it's only been 2 weeks, but already, like the last week or so, I feel like I'm starting to see the magic of this place. Just the amount of people and the amount of amazing stuff going on here, and just like the pure energy you can feel coming. It's super like stimulating, and it's pretty wonderful, and just like so much humanity like packed into such a small space. You feel like you're just right up close to like joy and suffering and people from many different walks of life, and it's really cool. And I think it will be great for me kind of as like, I don't know, for personal growth and for professional experience for sure. The stuff people doing here is like, I don't know. I went to this NYC Media Lab Summit on Thursday and some talks on virtual reality, and we got to experiment with this augmented reality stuff, and I was like, the future is now. I don't know. But yeah, I think it'll be wonderful. And yeah, I'm super happy to be here, and I'm happy to be back. So I guess I don't know if I'm still Molly up north anymore. I'm not very far up north, but I'm farther north than where I grew up. So I think I'll just stick to this channel. And now you can look forward to Tales from the Big Apple. And thank you all for tuning in. I've started taking Swedish class, so maybe jag talar på svenska. Probably not. We'll see. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. And I will see you for sure on future videos. Bye.